Good morning. My name is Jennifer Turner, and I'm the director of the China Environment Forum here at the Woodrow Wilson Center. I've been working here for 23 years, and the issue of cooperation and competition between the US and China on climate and clean energy issues has been a big topic over the years. And last year, we got a new grant that's called Cultivating U.S. and Chinese Leadership on Food and Agriculture. So this is a new area for me, and I have a lot to learn. So that's one of the reasons why today, for our green tea chat, that we're sitting down with the 2020 World Food Prize winner, Dr. Rattan Lal. He's at Ohio State University, and he was awarded this prize for developing a soil-centric approach to increasing food production that conserves natural resources and mitigates climate change. So, pun intended, we're going to dig into the science and the potential of climate action around soil. I think Dr. Rattan has done a lot of work with Chinese and US researchers around others around the world. He is just his full title, he's a distinguished university professor at the College of Food, Agricultural, and Environmental Sciences. And all right, we're going to just jump right into it, Rattan. So you received you're a soil scientist, you received the equivalent of a Nobel Prize in Food and Agriculture. So I just want to go back a little bit and ask you, could you just share a brief story? Why did you start on this path for soil science? Oh, and unmute yourself, please. Oh, Rattan, can you unmute yourself? Thanks.
I grew up on a small farm in the Punjab, Haryana region of northwestern India. And for small landholders, which are about 500 million around the world, they cultivate 2 hectare, 3 hectare, 4 hectare, 2 hectares, 5 acres. So you can understand 5 acres is small as far as the US is concerned, but it's a very large farm as far as the Asia is concerned. And for these farmers to be able to produce food from that very small area in a worst season is very important, because that is how their survival depends. So it's not as critical how much they can produce in a very good season, but to manage soil, crop, water resources so that they can produce assured minimum in a worst season really depends on the soil health and soil management and soil quality. So I had interest in soil from the very beginning. And when I was in college, there I had a choice to study plant breeding, animal science, or botany. And one of the professors told me that most trendy people are going into the plant breeding and genetics, Borlaug, Swaminathan era. And but everything is being ignored as far as the soil is concerned. So how about studying soil, which made big sense to me. And I majored in my undergraduate in soil, and then master and PhD degree in soil. And I think that was the best decision I ever made.
And one thing that also, because I feel like that a lot of us that, people that are listening today, many people that belong to my network, a lot of energy and climate, but maybe aren't fluent in soil. And one thing that I've seen that I've listened to some of your talks and your writings, that you describe soil as a bank account. And so what does this mean? Because I think that really, obviously everything grows out of soil, but what does it mean to be a bank account? Because I think that's kind of integral into the soil sequestration story.
Well, in a bank, the currency is dollar or pounds or whatever, euro. And when soil is bank account, it is currency is either carbon or nutrients or water. So I have considered carbon as a currency for bank account, and the nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. So let's say the nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, which are linked with carbon, you cannot withdraw more from a bank than what you deposit, especially these days with very low interest rates. You cannot withdraw more nutrients from soil than what you deposit. And when you take out always and you return nothing, that creates a negative budget. Like bank account becomes negative, and then bank manager is obviously going to have a discussion with the customer at that time. Soil also talks to us when we over withdraw than what we had put in. And the way soil talks is it begins to be degraded. Its quality, functionality, its ecosystem services that it generates, they become depleted. Therefore, we have a law of return. And the law of return says, whatever you take out from nature, such as soil, you must return back to the same location, one way or the other. Otherwise, it will not produce the ecosystem services that we need. And this is the philosophy.
Okay. And I want to remind people listening live that you underneath the stream here, there's a little box, a little widget for you to submit a question. Start asking your questions now. Nice if you say who you are, because then I can, yeah, it's nice to know who's talking. And yeah, so I'll be pulling some questions from the audience as well shortly. Okay. Thanks. Sorry about that. So okay, so soil's a bank account. And I know that that there's talk, in this world when we have big, climate change is an area where we're thinking that we need technology to solve it. Like there's even like they're building machines to take carbon out of the air. But my friend Dr. Mansell was telling me that we have to think like a soil. Nature has already got that built in, right? Can you tell us a little bit about how soil, how does it sequester carbon?
Yeah. This is not very well known that soil is the largest reservoir of carbon in the terrestrial biosphere. To 1 meter depth, soil contains organic carbon, which is about 1,500 gigaton. And it contains inorganic carbon, which is calcium carbonate, magnesium carbonate, about 750 to 900 gigaton. So total amount of carbon in soil to 1 meter depth is about 2,400 gigaton. Compare that with total carbon in all the trees and woodland and biomass plants growing, about 620, both live and dead. So total carbon in soil, organic and inorganic, is about 4 times that what is in the vegetation, about approximately, just to give you approximate number. And compare that in the atmosphere, which is going up very rapidly. It's about 870 or 880 gigaton, which is about 1/3 approximately of what is in the soil. So if soil loses carbon, even a small amount, from the percent or part per million point of view, and it is emitted in the atmosphere can be easily overwhelmed because soil is such a large amount. Now, if you take to 3 meter depth, including soils of the cryosphere, that the frozen soils of the tundra, Himalayan region, Andean regions, Kilimanjaro melting away very rapidly, the total carbon, considering the frozen soil, 6,000 gigaton. Wow. And soil has been source of carbon ever since human started settled agriculture. The moment you disturb the land, plowing, or you burn the biomass, or you drain a wetland, carbon goes up in the atmosphere. And now what we are trying to find out is how can we reverse that trend? Mm-hmm. And reversing the trend so that the carbon can be put back in soil from the atmosphere, both in the form of organic and inorganic, is what we call carbon sequestration. And
I know that in because I've been doing more readings on this since I started my project, and I think that there's different techniques that we can use to modify our agriculture, and there's 2 terms that are used often interchangeably, and I know they're not interchangeably, but the issue of conservation agriculture and regenerative agriculture. So these are some of the solutions that you're talking about. Can you briefly tell us like what they each are, and
yes,
maybe why it's hard
these
to
are
do
the
later.
practices to sequester carbon. And carbon organic can be sequestered only if you add biomass back to the soil, which could be crop residue, it can be manure, it can be mulch, it can be compost, some form or the other of the biomass above ground living on the soil as a mulch or below ground to the roots. So conservation agriculture term, it started with no-till farming in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. We used to call it plowless agriculture, direct seeding, no-till, conservation tillage. And later on, more recently, within last 10 years or so, 1 decade, we are now using the term conservation agriculture. And conservation agriculture has a few pillars. Some people call them 3 pillars. Some people think, no, there are 5 pillars. But the pillars are the following. No
Yeah.
tillage, minimum soil disturbance, leave all the crop residue on the surface, follow complex rotations, including growing cover crops in the off-season. Number 4, integrate crops with trees and livestock. And number 5, use integrated soil fertility management, not just fertilizer. So use bio-nitrogen fixation, mycorrhiza, compost, recycling, and supplement by chemical fertilizer. That's called integrated soil. So these 5 pillars, no till, residue mulch, keep the ground covered, grow cover crop, integrate animal and trees. This is called conservation agriculture. And the idea of conservation agriculture is to create a positive carbon budget in the soil as a bank account, so the carbon stock increases over time.
Got it.
Then
right.
Since last couple of years, when the Food System Summit took place, Europeans came back very strongly with 2 terms called regenerative agriculture and agroecology. And regenerative agriculture is a concept, it's an idea, it's an approach, it's a strategy, it's not a practice.
Okay.
Practice would be conservation agriculture, and which is form of regenerative, which restores soil health while we grow crops and raise animals.
Okay, good. Thank you. Because I want to clear it up, because it's new terminology for me and I want to be straight with it. So I'm starting to get some questions in. People keep submitting more questions. And I still have some of my own, but we'll interweave everyone now. Dr. Robert Bonish from the Department of State, he says, what are the current public thought leaders getting wrong about how we should be managing soils? Sorry, just my thing just jumped here to another question came in, sorry about that. So what are policymakers getting wrong about managing soils, while keeping in mind we must produce enough to feed the growing population? So we need to manage for climate and soil health, but we also got to feed this growing population. What are politicians getting wrong?
Well, one thing to consider is that we do have at present, because of the 3 C's, which is popularly being called conflict, COVID, and climate change. And conflicts such as Ukraine and Horn of Africa and elsewhere, COVID, obviously, climate change, have really adversely affected very strongly food security and nutritional security. Food security before the COVID was about 700 million people undernourished. And then with COVID, that number went up to about 820 million. And with the Ukraine crisis, the number now is 1.2 billion people, 1 in 7. So now the question is, do we have a problem of producing enough food? I think despite all this trouble that we are facing, we still think, I believe strongly, that we produce enough food to feed 8 billion people, which are now, and even 10 billion by 2050. The problem is distribution, access, poverty, non-availability, safety of food, and food waste. Out of 3 billion tons of grains produced, 1 billion ton reaches no stomach, animal or human. It's wasted. Sometimes the food waste of the fresh vegetable produce and fruits can be as much as 40 to 50%. So if we avoid food wastage, if we manage food properly, if we address civil strife and political problems, I think if we increase access to food, we do have enough food for everyone to feed at present. So it's an issue. The famines, which I've just mentioned, unfortunately, are man-made tragedies. And this is where the thought leaders have sometimes different opinion. They think it's a production issue. It is a political policy and social issue.
But also just think, and I've heard some conversations that, with the food crisis right now, that it's not the time to invest in these climate smart agriculture. But I would guess you would disagree with that.
I think so. I do not see how to dissociate that, because the food, in addition to undernutrition, there is a malnutrition. And while I was saying that almost 1 billion people or more are now undernourished, more than 2 billion have been and still are malnourished. And malnourishment implies poor micronutrients, which are 17 of them, which are essential for human health and well-being. They come from soil. So when soil is degraded, because poor bank account management, taking more out of soil than putting back in, when it is degraded, then of course the food quality, nutritional density is also affected. And that is a much bigger problem. Therefore, investing in regenerative agriculture and soil health, which means investing in sequestration of carbon in soil, they are really interlinked. And here, very rapidly, the carbon concentration in soil in the root zone should be about 2% on weight basis. But in many degraded, depleted soils of the small landholders of the world, it can be as little as 0.1%, 0.2%. And therefore, soil cannot produce enough and cannot produce food of high nutritional quality.
Okay, great. Yeah. No, thank you. It's very, very succinctly capturing like these complex issues. I want to turn back to go a step further, thinking that in at the global climate talks, the Convention of Parties 21, that was the first time where we really saw soil sequestration came onto the global discussion. And at that time, there was an initiative. I think it was launched by the Brits, right?
Yeah.
Or was it French? I don't want to get in the war here. French. Okay, sorry. It's French, everyone. It was French. There is a 4 per 1,000 initiative, and you have written in support of this. So could you tell us, because I think this is critical, and I know it came up again at the most recent COP. Can you tell us what it is and why it's so important?
COP 21, which was in 2015, French government, it was held in Paris. And the French Minister of Agriculture at that time, his name was Stéphane Le Foll. Mr. Stéphane Le Foll and his colleagues, about 8, 9 of them, came to Ohio State to talk with us, discuss with us, and I visited with them. And we also showed them some farm. The idea was, how much carbon can you put back in soil that can negate at that time, during that decade, the carbon content which is increasing in the atmosphere. The increase in atmosphere during that decade was 3.6 gigaton of carbon per year in the atmosphere, coming from fossil fuel and from soil. So his idea was, how much carbon can you put back in soil to offset 3.6? And that's the discussion we had here in my lab, my office. So soil to 40 centimeter depth contains about 850 gigaton. Remember, I said soil to 1 meter depth contains 1500 to 80 centimeter. So if you multiply 850 by about 4 and divide by 1,000, it produces the amount of carbon that negates what was increasing in the atmosphere at that time. And therefore the term 4 per 1,000. Okay. As far as I'm concerned, it's an aspirational slogan. It's a goal. It's a great idea. And I would support any policymakers who would consider soil as a medium to mitigate climate change. And here he was. So I really wanted to support him. We were at that time very heavily involved with International Union of Soil Science. I was incoming president, and therefore I strongly supported them. And unfortunately, it has not been implemented. Even if we were to think about 1 per 1,000 sequestration, not 4 per 1,000, even that would make a big difference. But we have not been able to implement it. Subsequent COP, the one in Morocco came up with adapting African agriculture. The one in Madrid, which was supposed to be in Chile, came up with a concept called Placo. And one in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt really devoted one way, first time ever, to food security and soil health. concept. So I think it's a good trend.
Mhm.
And I hope that the next one coming up in UAE and also in Middle East will continue that trend where we make agriculture a solution to climate change.
Well, as you know, you see my big sign. I do stuff on China.
Yes.
China and the U.S. And we
Yes.
have to remind ourselves back in 2014, when the U.S. and China signed their global climate agreement, it opened the pathway to Paris. So whether acting together or in parallel, when the U.S. and China move on a topic on climate, the world comes too. So wanted to ask you, Dr. Mansell, she texted me before. She gets to slip in her question this way. She asked, what are some of the challenges or obstacles for the U.S. and China to implement the 4 in 1,000 in, maybe in their own countries? I mean, what are the big challenges that they each
Right.
faced? Is it not enough training? What? Tell us.
I think we can always say that not enough communication between land managers and the extension sometime, weakness of that link between the two. But I think the major challenge is policy. If we have policy which is pro-nature, pro-agriculture, and pro-farmer, and I'll give an example of what exactly I mean by that. Farmers who are the greatest steward of natural resources, soil, water, biodiversity, they would implement what is best to restore and manage and sustain soil health. But the policies have to be right. And one of the critical policy I'm thinking about is Soil Health Act. We have a Clean Air Act, we have Clean Water Act, but no soil health. How in the world is it ever possible to have clean air and clean water when you have degraded soils? So we need the third part of that stool, three-legged stool, water, air, and soil. They go together. So a Soil Health Act, maybe for the Farm Bill coming up, hopefully it happens. We must have a policy to reward farmer, and it's not a subsidy, reward farmer for ecosystem services, such as carbon sequestration. And carbon sequestration reward should be at the societal value of carbon. What I mean by societal value is how much ecosystem services does carbon put in the soil increases. And that at the moment is about $50 a credit.
Wow.
In about 2012, when I published the first article, it was $35 per credit. Prices have changed. And at the moment, the current government also pays $50 per credit when industry injects CO2 from the chimney of a power plant or ethanol plant about a mile deep in the ground. Why not pay the farmers and ranchers and foresters the same amount when they put 1 ton of carbon dioxide in the land? I think that is the major hurdle, not paying farmers enough, not motivating them enough to translate science into action. So when they change from conventional agriculture to regenerative, or the one that create a positive bank account of carbon in soil, that sometimes is not producing the highest yield, at least for the short period. So paying them properly would overcome that obstacle.
I have to point out that I have a mug that says, Ohio farmers are resourceful. So it's like this, the farm, and also making sure that, farmers respond to markets. And
we have some very tail-blazing, pioneering farmers, many of them in Ohio, and we are very proud of them. We need those farmers to help us translate science into action.
Well, just so you know that I am planning in the course of this grant that I love bringing soil scientists, but I'm going to bring some farmers on to talk too soon. In fact, there was a quick question that came, related to farming. There was Jan Blair, Soil and Water Conservation District, Westchester, New York, asked the question, are you concerned that so much farmland is being used for solar panels?
I think if the question is aimed at that, perhaps solar panel taking some agricultural land out of production, if that is the case, personally, I believe that right now we have 12 billion acre of land under agriculture globally, 5 billion hectare, 1.5 billion under cropland, and 3.7 billion under rangeland and grazing land. If we manage the land properly, if we narrow the yield gap, what can be obtained with good management and good practices than what is being obtained, especially in developing countries like Sub-Saharan Africa, Andean region, Central America, the Caribbean, South Asia. I do not think we need that much land. I'm really proposing many flora, hopefully, that between now and 2100, we should return half of the land back to nature. Now, I'm not saying put all solar panels on that. No.
That's not nature, yeah.
Back to nature. Grow trees, vegetation, grasses to sequester carbon, improve water quality, give more land to wildlife, which I think is the best way for human to live in peace with our co-inhabitants of the planet Earth, which are more than 7 million.
Great. I have a question that came in early on from Robert Jordan, a retired international development professional. He says, can you please let us know what role, if any, did U.S. international development programs assist you in your education or your professional science research? And are USAID and other U.S. financed initiatives currently doing enough to promote soil health in developing economies?
That's a very good question. I'm a member of the BIFAD, Board for International Food and Agriculture Development, and they have a subcommittee. In fact, their report is being finalized to talk about how to promote nature-positive agriculture, how to sequester carbon in soil to mitigate climate change. So yes, USAID is doing it, and I hope that some further action will come. I have just been reading yesterday how the Soil Protection Act is being adopted right now by EU. And
EU.
we are behind. So I'm hoping that if EU adopts soil protection policy and act amongst all the 27 countries, I hope US is not left behind. We also have a Soil Health and Soil Protection Act so that we can make soil, land, agriculture a solution to climate change. And if we can stop burning fossil fuel now, and we use agriculture and forestry better, the technical potential until 2100 is to draw down atmosphere 150 parts per million of CO2.
All right. Now, what about China? Because I know you do a lot of work. You have partners in China. Where are they in terms of the, soil sequestration efforts? Do they have a soil?
Globally, conservation agriculture is practiced on about 200 million hectares and more out of 1.5 billion hectares. Most of that 200 million is in North America and South America, a little bit of Australia and New Zealand, not much in Asia, especially China and India, not much in Africa. So we have a long way to go to promote conservation agriculture, which we talked before, in Asia and in Africa and elsewhere in developing countries. This is where USAID can really play a major role, which they have been doing in the past. And I think they can take more active role in how to promote agriculture as a solution to climate change.
And do you think that, the U.S., I know that the Biden administration, the Department of Ag they've been supporting these new climate smart agricultural projects around the country. So there's money going into this in the United States. Do you see this as an area, could the U.S. and China come together on this topic?
Absolutely, they should. They should come together. They are the now 1 and 2 largest economies of the world. They both have a large agricultural industry landscape. They have a lot to learn from one another. And this problem of climate change is so humongous that no one country, one institution can solve it. It's a working together, which is really going to create this synergism. I think China has a more historical track record of good agricultural practices going back to 7,000-8,000 years back.
A little longer than America, yeah.
A little bit longer. Yeah, but I think working together is really the solution. And this is where we have more current knowledge of science, how conservation agriculture work, how it can be made profitable and amenable. China has not yet adopted that, other than some estimate is 5 million hectares. So 5 million hectares out of 160 or 170 million hectares is very small for the total area of China. India is also the same way. I think they are adopting only on 1 million hectare. Total of Africa is also 1 million hectare. So these regions, Africa and Asia, have a long way to go to promote what you said, climate smart agriculture.
Climate smart agriculture, yeah.
I have a reservation in using that term.
Okay, that's what it is under the administration. Yeah. So what should they say?
Which means some people are doing climate stupid agriculture.
That's a good
point. And I think we got to be careful not to insult anybody.
Yeah.
So I think it's a climate resilient agriculture.
That's a good term. I like
versus
that term.
Climate vulnerable agriculture. That is much more exactly, it translates to what happens. Climate resilient means soil and agriculture are somehow able to adapt and mitigate climate change. And so if we say only 15% of the farmers are climate smart, that means the others are climate stupid. I don't want to use that term.
Okay. And words matter. So we're bumping up to the end of our time, but I want to add that I do know that in the beginning of my work on food and climate ag stuff, that there are lots of scientists in China who are doing research on soil. So it's not a paucity of the science, but so that there definitely could be an opportunity. I mean, because our U.S. and Chinese scientists have worked together.
I must compliment Chinese colleagues. I had somewhere about 30 visiting scientists from China over the last 20-year period. And they all, when they went back, not only that they got promoted because they had some experience, but they all did much better research than I could have really expected. Mm-hmm. And I have been working with them until now. When they go back, some of them have come here 2 to 3 times. Come back again and again to do. So yes, the scientific skill, know-how and publication coming out of China are very impressive. So I don't think that is the issue. The issue is translating into practice at a farm level through better policies.
Great. Well, we're gonna wrap it up there. So again, I want to thank you. I mean, you are a world leader on soil and climate issues. And again, I'm never going to say climate smart ag again, except when I'm talking about the program.
I didn't mean to be negative, but
but it's good. But language matters. Yeah,
language matters because we want to make sure that all farmers are respected. Mm-hmm. Some need to be given more incentive to adopt agriculture, which can make it a solution.
Yep. All right, but thank you so much. I want to remind the audience that keep an eye on your email boxes. We have a China Belt and Road, greening the Belt and Road on February 22nd. It's not up yet, but we're also going to we're going to talk about soil and algae at the end of the month. And there's on March 7th, working with the California China Climate Initiative, we're going to have a discussion of food waste and climate. So, all right. Thank you so much. And I will be knocking on your door to get some more advice and hopefully you can help me find some of those Ohio farmers to come and talk to.
My pleasure to work with you.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good day. Bye-bye.